Thank you very much for affording us the time. For our first question is, tell us, how do you got involved in this essential oil business?
Thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to being able to give you some info, I hope, that becomes useful. I've been in the essential oil industry since 2004. I started off in the buku and tajit industry, also focusing quite a lot on boutique, niche Western Cape oils like Cape Chamomile and Cape May and so forth. Shortly thereafter, I moved to Yucca Forest. Yucca Forest is a eucalyptus producer. So we focus mainly on crude eucalyptus oil as well as fractionated oils. We also produce tajit or Tajitis minuta. We have two farms based up in Mpumalanga in the Panbelt area. They're both about 460 hectares each. And on these farms, we grow mainly eucalyptus dives and then some other eucalyptus species as well. We have our production facility on the main farm too, where we do the fractionation of the various oils. Yes, and the Yucca Forest itself has been it's been around since 1964, and it's now owned by Catherine Crowley. She's an owner based in the US. Her family took over in about 2011. So that's just the background.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Talking about the essential oils specifically in your background, what is your view in terms of the potential, export potential of South Africa's essential oils and vegetable oils?
Look, personally, I think there's great potential. I think a couple of years back, probably a decade ago, South African oils weren't very well known. They have become more well-known overseas, and I think a lot of the buyers overseas now realize that our quality is just as good as anywhere else. We're efficient, our prices are competitive. So I'm very positive about the export potential of South African oils, and that would be essential oils and vegetable oils as well. And I think we're fortunate to have quite a diverse flora in South Africa, where you can't find it anywhere else in the world. So I think that's a big bonus too. And I think overall, we can be competitive with anybody else, any other country.
And in which crop do you think South Africa have a competitive advantage in?
At the moment, I would say tea tree. I know that there's a lot of new producers coming online. So there's a lot more quantities available. I think the quality is just as good as Australian, although I think the Australians will probably dispute that. And I do think that our price is competitive. So that would be one that I think has great potential.
As a buyer and as an exporter, who determines the requirements to which these oils should comply with, or the processes should comply with?
That would definitely be the client. So the quality, the specification, the price, everything actually just goes back to the client. So you have to meet the client's demands, specification, requests, etc.
So in general, then, what is the kind of requirements to be able to accept the South African essential oils and vegetable oils?
Usually our clients would provide us with a spec for a particular oil. We're fortunate enough to have our own internal lab that we can do GC analysis on, and we can do various odor profile tests, specific gravity, all of those sort of lab tests. So what we would do is we would compare their spec against the oil that we're either producing ourselves or we're bringing in. And we obviously have to be competitive price-wise. We have to ensure the quality is good. Traceability is a big thing too, so that if you've got any issues with the oil, you need to be able to trace back where it came from and resolve any issues related to that. Overall, I think those are actually the main things. Quality is a big thing. And obviously, at the end of the day, if your price is not competitive, they're going to look elsewhere. So that's also quite a big role player.
With the increased awareness of the environment, as well as other factors such as social issues, farm labors, etc. Your clients then, is there certain requirements that they impose on, for instance, on the producers that you as a buyer needs to be able to prove that they have complied to those requirements?
I'm probably going to speak more from a producer's point of view in that way. I mean, we do like to buy oils that have a story behind them because our clients appreciate that as well. But from Yucca Forest's point of view, we are very big on social impact in our area. And, we enjoy being able to tell our clients what we're doing. And it's something that we've always done, not because we feel we have to do it, but because it's part of what we do. It's our ethos. And we would appreciate it if our clients, or not our clients, if our suppliers can do the same. And the majority of them do have a story to tell. So I think that's really important. And we do get asked that very often. We also have a bronze EcoVadis medal, which also shows what we've done with regards to environment and social impact and all of that. So we're quite pleased to be at that level as well. So that's also important.
You've touched on the role of testing, the testing place within the verifying the quality of the oils. What role does certification and inspection plays within the process?
It's actually quite important. I mean, we would appreciate it if our suppliers could actually generate their own certificates of analysis or any other lab analysis, because it just helps us to be able to make sure the quality is on point. I think it's really important. Unfortunately, a lot of smaller producers within South Africa don't have access to their own internal lab. So they have to have tests done outside, which is quite costly. We are fortunate enough that we can do some of these tests ourselves. We're not set up to do vegetable oil testing, but we can analyze any essential oil. So that's terribly important. It would just be good if most of the smaller players had access to a lab where they could have their oils checked.
And in terms of matters such as good agricultural practices, HACCP or hazmat or whatever the requirements are, is there any of those imposed on, for instance, the producers and the processors?
We do get asked every so often if we are ISO compliant or HACCP. We ourselves do have a food safety process in place. And most of our suppliers have a similar sort of standard. Although they may not be certified, they do have a procedure or process in place. So it is pretty important. It's becoming more important, I would say, lately than it has been in the last, I say, probably decade or so.
I just want to touch on the export documentation. What would normally be required from you as an exporter in terms of export documentation that you need to prove compliance to whatever the requirement is that your customer imposed?
Okay, the standard documentation would obviously be your bill of lading or your airway bill. Most of our clients would then also request a safety data sheet or a technical data sheet, a certificate of analysis. Another important document, depending on which part of the world it's going to, would be a certificate of origin. That's pretty important if they want to be excluded from duty and all other items. We also need to, depending on where the oil is going to, if it's going to the US, one has to do a 10+2 ISF filing, which is similar to a prior notice, but it's also linked with the FDA. That has to be done 48 hours before your goods actually are loaded, which becomes quite tricky because if you haven't done it, then you get penalized quite heftily. I'm just trying to think what other items there are. There's also, we do a couple of organic oils and we buy in a few organic oils. And it's important then to be able to supply a certificate of inspection to your client. And that now also needs to be done before the goods have actually departed. So those I would say would be the most important item.
Then coming to the bottling and the labeling, where it's the requirements of labeling, where does that come from and what would it normally entail?
The client normally always requests obviously their purchase order number, and they have a specific product code that they allocate to whatever product they're bringing in. That has to be on the label. Our batch number needs to be there. There would be a manufacturing best before date, weights obviously, and then if you are REACH registered for a particular client, you would have to put your REACH registration number on the labeling, and it will obviously also be address details, etc. And then if your oil is organically certified, you have to stipulate that too on the labeling. So those are the general requirements.
You have been through the process for quite some time, and you've seen how this sector evolved obviously over time, as new entrants and other smaller ones that didn't make it, etc. What do you see is the biggest challenge in this industry?
I think for us, I mean, we're fortunate to be in a part of the world where the climate is pretty. It's pretty standard, from one area to another, but we do obviously have climatic issues. In the Western Cape, for example, with buchu and other fynbos oils, we had a drought 2 or 3 years ago. So that sort of natural disaster, it has a devastating effect on a natural product, as it would do. And with a lot of other oils too, if we don't have sufficient rains, it also becomes a problem. So I think climate is it's a big problem, and I think that's a global problem. It's not just within South Africa.
And in terms of things like seed selection, planting, do we have any challenges in that respect as well?
Not that I'm aware of. We have for ourselves as producers, we have our own seed. We have our own mother blocks where we pull our seed from. I'm not sure if that's an issue with any of our suppliers. It seems.
So I'm a small guy, entrepreneur that wants to get into this particular space, want to start my own farm, and as well as see it through to processing, and obviously want to sell it to you to export. What advice would you give me?
Say the most important thing would be to do your research as best as you can, because you don't want to invest a lot of money in a product that seems to be the next big thing at the moment, and because it's a natural product, the demand or the usage is always going to fluctuate. So you don't want to be stuck with a product that you put a lot of money into and you cannot sell, especially if it's a product that has a longer growing cycle. If it takes a year or so before you can do your first harvest, after that year has passed, you may not be able to sell your product. So that's a big problem. I think just to be aware of that, and also not to just go for products that seem to be easier ones to grow at that time. So that to me is an issue, because you don't want to flood the market with an oil that seems to be a big item at one stage, and when you're ready to be able to put it on the market, it's no longer of interest. So do your research. I think that's terribly important.
I've got a last question for you. In general, concerning the industry as a whole, what is your view, and what would be your advice to deal with any of the challenges in the industry as such?
One thing that would be good is look, it depends which oil we're talking about, but I think notoriously the South African industry it's been quite close-knit, and people tend to keep any info they have to themselves. They don't like sharing. It's competitive, and you can understand that. But I think if all the players could work together, I think that would improve everything overall. I think we'd see more support, from government, etc. And I think that would actually help immensely. So just that general networking, people wanting to help each other, I think that's vital.
Ms. Laubscher, thank you very much. Do you have any concluding remarks before we close on it?
Just very grateful to be given this opportunity. Thank you.